I won't be doing it for a long, long time.
Like you said, that's why you're married.
Yes, that's right, that's
Be
right.
nice to me, or I'll call your wife. I know where she works.
Yeah, I know,
I know her too.
yeah, I know.
I wonder if she's free for lunch tomorrow. What do you think?
No, she's not. She's not.
Okay. Am I live?
Yes.
You can hear me? Really?
Oh, put Christine.
I don't think you can.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I call to order the meeting of the Town Commission, June 3rd, 2019, at 6 p.m. Carla, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bessler,
Here.
Mayor Cos,
Here.
Commissioner Herbert,
Here.
Vice Mayor Magruder.
Here.
Let the record show Commissioner DeHasseth is absent with notice.
Okay. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first, I'd like to welcome our former town clerk, Karen Hansick is here. 35 years guest clerk in South Florida. And we also hear from Representative Caruso, who made it a special calendar date to be here today, which we appreciate. Okay, first let's take care of additions, deletions, modifications, and approval of agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, modifications of the agenda? Okay, can we have a motion to approve the
So
agenda?
moved.
I'll second it.
Second. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous. Okay, I'd like to invite Representative Mike Caruso up to our microphone. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Cos. Appreciate it. And thank you, Vice Mayor Magruder. Where are you?
Right here.
Yeah, right there.
I didn't move.
And commissioners and chief, pleasure to see you all. Appreciate you inviting me here tonight and with the opportunity to give you a legislative update of what took place during the 2019 session up there in Tallahassee. You know, the one thing that we are mandated to do as a house and the legislature body is to approve a budget, and we did approve a budget. It was $91.1 billion. And we're waiting for the governor to sign it. Well, he hasn't actually been sent to him yet. So when he gets it, I hope he signs it. He's probably working on some line item vetoes at the moment. So we'll give him some time on that one. But overall, we allocated about $38 billion to health care, and we allocated $16 billion to K through 12 education. And the K through 12 education allocation was significant. It was an increase of about $783 million, which worked out to about $243 per student. So if you got kids in school or grandchildren in school, that's a significant increase. If you go back a year, last year's allocation was just over $40 per student increase. And the year before that, it was zero. So $243 was quite significant. Let's see, we allocated $8.25 billion to higher education for the university and college systems. And for the third year in a row, U.S. News has ranked Florida colleges and university system, our system here, higher ed, as #1 in the country. So you can be proud, and you know, when you're talking to your children and your grandchildren or anybody from out of town, you know, we got the best university system in the entire United States of America. So we can be proud of that right here in Florida. So I mean, I know I got 7 children, and they all graduate high school and they go, Dad, I want to go to University of Wisconsin or University of California or University of Vermont or Delaware or whatever. And I go, son, we got, you know, kids, we got the best university system right here in our own backyard. Why would you want to go to one that's ranked 34th? You know? So, and I'm excited about what's taken place in the legislature. We are prioritizing affordability and pathways to careers. We've revamped the whole education system for our universities and colleges. No longer are we just sending kids to our universities just to get them a diploma and end up with a lot of debt. We're trying to find them. We're working towards getting them a job when they do graduate. And we see that throughout the university system. That's how they get rated based on that. That's how they get extra funding based on that the rate that they accomplish on getting kids jobs within 6 months after graduating. And we see that also in the vocational training, and that is being done at the state college level. Palm Beach State College has programs. In fact, I've got my son is enrolling in the HVAC program there, and after 20 months, they guarantee him a job. Nobody guarantees anything, but they say we have a backlog of companies trying to get our graduates and just waiting. They hire all of them when they get out of school. So that's how our education system is headed now. Let's see, the environment. We also focused on environment. Not only did we focus on the education, I was proud that our governor has put so much emphasis in education and the environment. We allocated $700 million towards Everglades restoration and water projects, $33 million for Florida Forever, and $4.2 million for red tide research. We know how it was last summer. And red tide on our beaches and the bad press that got the state of Florida. And we're trying to stop that every way we can. So some research into that. As we know, it's been around for over 400. We know of back to Ponce de Leon's time. He wrote about red tide in our waters. So we've had it for a long time. We don't know exactly how to stop it, but we're going to put some money into researching that. Also, $50 million towards our beaches. And then some other things, we allocated $16 million to Enterprise Florida, $21 million to our libraries, another $23 million to the arts, and I think that was important. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, but the year before we didn't allocate, we cut back on the arts, and the one thing I think that makes man different from the animals is art and is the arts. And so by allocating $23 million towards that, I think it stands well for that. Let's see, other things. District 89, Boca Raton through Ocean Ridge all the way to Singer Island, hugs the coastline here. District 89, I was able to bring back about $42 million in allocations to the district, and proud to have done so. Up there, there's a lot of politicking going on to try to get your appropriations through, and I fought hard for them and worked every day, both the Senate side and the House side, to try to get the appropriations. And I feel like we fared very well, considering some districts didn't get anything. So I was excited for that. Now, some of the things we've got for the Palm Beach County and District 89 is. Let's see, $300,000 for JARC Community Works, $325,000 for Wayne Barton Study Center, $11.5 million for an FAU, A.D. Henderson University Lab School. If you know, there's a K through 12 lab school ranked 1 or 2 in the country on our FAU campus, and the roof is literally falling in. The electricity works sometimes it doesn't. It's really strange. Built in the 1960s. It's got asbestos, all that. We're going to be tearing it down now and building a new one. So that those kids can have a proper place to work. Lead paint, you think about it, it's got it. Whatever we had there. $12 million for FAU 100, which is a program that is established to try to get FAU to be the top one in the top 100 schools in the country. What else? $150,000 for Palm Beach Opera, $150,000 for Flagler Museum, $2 million for Alzheimer's Community Care. And I was excited. I worked hard for that one because if you've been to that program, it is amazing. They've got one office. Closest one to here is probably Boynton Beach, just directly west here. What else we get? We got another 11 million for the Jupiter Dental School up in for FAU up in Jupiter. So let's see here. Other than that, my bills. I passed a couple bills, which I was pleased to do. One is the anti-Semitism bill, which the governor actually signed last week in Israel, if you were watching the news. It adds discrimination of all religions to the K through 20 system, and that's so that you can't discriminate based on religion. It also identifies and defines what anti-Semitism is, and with the purpose is to stop the hate that's growing and growing on our campuses. There's a rising tide of hate, and I think we need to stop it, as early as we can. So I was excited about that. Another bill was the sober home bill. The sober home bill, it worked at two different levels. It gave it changed the wording in the law just slightly. We had to change one word in it, which a couple of the judges in our county court system were kind of wavering on, saying it wasn't tight enough, and there's one big pending case that's in appeals, which will get corrected here, but where it allowed the patient brokers to go free. And we know patient brokering is illegal in the state of Florida, and now the Attorney General will have all the tools he needs to stop that. It also allowed for an increase in what do you call it, I can't think of the name of it, but it's the people that work with their specialists. Peer specialist is what I'm looking for. It allows for more peer specialists to get their licenses in order to help those that are suffering from addiction, trying to fight it. We did pass a tax bill this year. It calls for $121 million of savings, tax savings. It cuts the property tax, the sales tax on commercial properties from 5.7 to 5.5%. So if you're renting, your sales tax should go down on your commercial leases. And it also allows for a hurricane preparedness tax holiday and a school supply sales tax holiday. And then I guess a couple of the other final things would be in terms of healthcare, we legalized the ability to purchase medications from Canada. A lot of people, they say, they're going to be dangerous medications coming in. We get 40% right now of our ingredients for medications from China. The United States does, our manufacturers of medications do, 40%. But we're not allowed to buy medications from overseas in Canada. So now we're going to be able to do that. It should bring the cost significantly down. And provide more competition. And then we also legalized telemedicine, to where a doctor can, under certain circumstances, and I won't go into it tonight, but they'll be able to look at and treat people based on a teleconference type of system. We also passed some 3 new roads in the state and toll roads up in the northwest section of Florida. So that's kind of the legislative update. I'm here for questions if you have them. I'll take them from the mayor and the commission.
First, thank you for everything you've informed us of and all you've done up there. We're extremely happy.
You're welcome, Mayor.
Since politics are local, let me get to our little tiny local issues.
Okay.
Number one, I believe you wrote a letter on our crosswalk situation at the south of town, that if we bumped into a DOT problem, you'd help us out. So I just wanted the town to be aware of that.
And did that, the letter I understood, you got your approval for the FDOT?
So far, so good. We were in the study phase. and
study
we'll
phase.
expand from there.
Good.
Second thing is, we're about to form a sewer committee. Let's call it switch from sewer to septic.
Septic to sewer. I love you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, and we're doing this because we understand when DeSantis was running, Governor DeSantis was running, he had like a 10-year plan where he's gonna implement on the barrier islands that they had to switch from septic to sewer. So
Right.
we're gonna need, that's gonna be a lot of money. And
Yeah,
I
it
don't,
will be.
we'll have our committee formed. At some point, we'll probably reach out to Tallahassee to find what kind of grants, funds, et cetera.
I would ask you to try to put that package together as soon as you can, Mayor, and get it to me, I don't know if you can, by August or early September. And I'd be happy to sponsor a bill for an appropriation for that kind of conversion. I mean, it certainly won't, no appropriation's gonna come through at 100%, but, you know, if we could get a 2-to-1 or 50-50, that, you know, it's something I'd be happy to sponsor. This year, I had sponsored one for the town of Hypoluxo, and it went all the way through committee, it went all the way through the whole process, and it was even in the budget until the very end, where they kind of sweeped all of our water projects for this part of the country, I mean, for this part of the state, to take that money and put it up into the Panhandle to fight the destruction that the Hurricane Michael did. So we won't have that next year, and I know that we'll be looking for, there'll be the appropriations for water projects here, water and sewer projects here will be open. So I'd be happy to sponsor a bill to help the city out.
Commissioners, got any questions?
I'd just like to thank you on the short-term rental bill, that it didn't get passed, and hopefully next year, when it shows its ugly face again, you'll knock it down again. And then also the scooter bill, we don't know what that would have done to us, but we don't think it would have been a great bill for us to have scooters all over the beaches and stuff.
Well, I've seen it. I've seen the scooters in Nashville, and if you go to Nashville, they're everywhere. They're on every corner, every sidewalk, every place. And I guess it works for Nashville, but I think that each city should have its own ability to determine if they want scooters or not want scooters. And if you heard my arguments in committee, I argued against it, because it did come before one of my committees. So transportation. So I will keep the charge on to fight that for you guys.
Right, thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I appreciate you inviting me here. And if I could ask, if anybody has any questions or any concerns and want to get in touch with me, my phone number should be on the back of that Caruso Chronicle that you got. And please feel free to reach out to me for anything. I'd be happy to work with you and help you, and, you know, call me anytime. Okay? Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Our next, take care, thanks, Nick. I'd like to welcome our town auditor, Ron Bennett, to the podium for a presentation. It's the auditing report from 2018.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. First off, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, management, and staff of the town, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come discuss your fiscal year 18 audit. We have a handout up there. I'll go over that in just a moment. I want to talk about the non-number items for just a moment. Anyone that hasn't seen the report, it's on the website, right?
It will be tomorrow.
It'll be available on the town's website tomorrow. It looks kind of like this. It's to me, it's a way of making a living, but some people, it gives them a headache. So. But there's a lot of good information in here. But in addition to all the numbers and the various other information, there are 4 reports in there, which is the product of the independent auditors. And the first one starts on page 1. And in that report, it says, management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of these financial statements. And the auditors are responsible to express opinions on these financial statements based on our audit. So that was the primary purpose of the audit, is to give an opinion on the financial statements. And I'm glad to say in that same report, it says that we gave what we call a clean opinion. That is, we believe the financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Then if you'll jump over to page 64, the second report. The rest of the reports are in the back. They're reports 2, 3, and 4, one right behind the other. The report that's on page 64 and 65 is required by government auditing standards. When you go audit a governmental entity in Florida, you have two sets of auditing standards. You have generally accepted auditing standards, which applies to all audits, no matter what type of entity it is. And if it's a governmental entity, you also have to follow government auditing standards. And as a result of governing auditing standards, you have to issue this report. And the real purpose of this report is on page 65, says the purpose of this report is solely to describe the scope of our testing of internal control and compliance and the results of that testing, and not to provide an opinion on the effectiveness of internal control or on compliance. So what they're talking about is, in addition to looking at the numbers in the financial statements, we have to gain an understanding of the internal control structure for the town in order to plan our audit. If in that process we come across something we think is an internal control deficiency, then we're required to report it in this report. I'm glad to say we didn't find any items of that nature. Also, we're required to look at various types of compliance, and there's another compliance report coming up. But governments are subject to a lot of compliance requirements by the federal government, the state government. We're required to look at a number of those. I'm pleased again to say we didn't find any non-compliance. The third report starts on page 66, and this is a management letter in accordance with the rules of the Auditor General of the State of Florida. They basically give all the auditors, here's a boilerplate report, you have to comment on these specific items. If you find anything wrong, you gotta say so. If you didn't, you gotta say so. So if you go through that, you'll see those items. And again, there was nothing we had to report that was a deficiency. So everything was okay there. The final report is an opinion on, it's called an attestation report, but Florida Statute Section 218.415, that's the statute that says what type of instruments a governmental body in Florida can invest in, what type of investments you can put your money in. And we have to check to see that you follow that statute. And again, I'm happy to say that the town's in compliance with that statute. Now, the part I like, the numbers. Have a little handout. I didn't have enough for everybody, so we got it on the overhead. It's a summary, a 5-year summary. Oh, if you go to page 2. The page 2 is the governmental revenues. You only have governmental funds at the town, and you have 2 of them. You have the general fund where most of the activity takes place, and you have a capital projects fund where major capital projects or funds for those are expended. This combines those 2 funds, so these are your total revenues for the entire town. And you can see over a 5-year history there. Year over year, the revenue increased $211,000, which is about 3.3%. Most of the increase was due to property taxes. You can see the top line, about $140,000. A little further down, you see sales tax. Primarily, that was due to an increase in the infrastructure surtax. You didn't get a full year of it in 17. You got a full year of it in 18. I think it went into effect, was it January or February in the original year? I think it was February of 17. So you didn't have a full year in the 17 year. You did in the 18 year. So you picked up some more there. Fines and forfeitures, those kind of bounce around. This year was a good year. Increased $50,000 over the prior year. If you go to page 3, Carly, you can see this in a picture. I like the pictures better myself. You can see what's happened over the last 5 years, and the revenues have gradually increased, which is what you'd expect. If nothing changed except inflation, you'd expect to see 2 or 3% increase, something along that nature. The increase this year was 3.3%, so it was barely more than inflation. Page 4. This is the money coming in, the revenues. Now we're going to look at the money going out, the expenditures by function. General government and public safety obviously account for most of your expenditures, with public safety accounting for about 53%. General government 17%, so that's 70% of your total expenditures in those 2 functions. You can see we had a total increase of about 4.7%. Again, not a whole lot more than inflation. It was kind of a mixed bag. General government and public safety went up. Capital outlay went down. Capital outlay is one of those things that's they're non-recurring expenditures. You can have a lot in one year and not much in the next, and that's what happened here. It went down. The debt service is essentially equal. The monthly payments are the same, so there's virtually no change there. And the other two items are small by comparison. So you had a $286,000 increase from $6.085 million to $6.371. Again, if you'll go to the next page, Carl, appreciate it. You can see the same sort of stair step, and the revenues and expenditures are kind of going in lockstep. Next page. When you get done at the end of the day, you take your revenues and you subtract off your expenditures, and what you got left over is your equity. And equity is cumulative. This is the cumulative income for forever. And so it's called your net worth if you're in a business or an individual. They call it fund balance in governmental entities. Fund balance can come in 5 categories. The town has 4 of them. The best category, the one you like most of your money to be in, is unassigned. The reason for that is unassigned fund balance are the funds that the town can use for any lawful purpose at the discretion of the commission. Assigned, that's funds that have been earmarked by the commission for specific purposes. They could, if they saw fit, change that earmark and unearmark it. If you needed it for an emergency or something, you could still access those funds. Restricted funds, those are ones that you can't change. They're restricted by outside parties. A fair portion of this is the money for the infrastructure surtax. You're going to be able to spend it only for those projects that meet the requirements of the referendum. Non-spendable is basically funds that have already been spent. If you've purchased inventory or you got a prepaid expense, you can't spend it because you already did. You have very little of that. Your total fund balance is about $4.8 million, just over. It increased about $145,000, just over $145,000. And the $4.8 million is about 63% of the general fund expenditures for the prior year, for 2018. And the significance of that is that's your reserve. So you have almost 2/3 of a year of funds on hand. If you had a real disaster, you could go 2/3 of a year without bringing in a penny and still have enough money to pay all the expenses or to pay the ongoing expenses and reconstruct things in case of a hurricane or something of that nature. Next page, please. Same thing, you see the chart here, the bottom, the pale blue, that's the unassigned, that's the good stuff. The red is the assigned, which you could tap if you had to. And the yellow is the restricted, which you can't touch other than for the specific purpose for which it was earmarked. Just to add to the confusion, there are actually 2 sets of financial statements in the document. There are what's called fund financial statements, and that's the general fund and the capital projects fund. And the difference between those, and then you have one that's called the entity-wide. And the difference is the basis of accounting, the way you account for it. The funds use current financial resources, and what that is you have nothing but current assets and current liabilities. You don't have any long-term debt, you don't have any capital assets, you don't have any kind of long-term liability or long-term asset. The revenues are recognized on something called a modified accrual basis of accounting. That says, the definition of that says that a revenue has to be measurable, that is, you know how much it is, and it has to be available. That means you had to collect it within 60 days of year end in order to consider a revenue. If you're in a for-profit business, you would use full accrual, and the second set of financial statements uses the full accrual basis of accounting. But it also uses the economic resources. So that says what you include, and the other says when you include it. Economic resources says you include everything, every kind of revenue or expenditure, and they're called revenues and expenses instead of expenditures. And full accrual says we recognize it when we earn it, whether we've collected or not. And on the liability side, we recognize it when we owe it, whether we've paid it or not. So those statements are called the statement of net position. That's kind of like your balance sheet in a for-profit business. This is a summary of it. You actually need to look at both sets of financial statements to get a long-term perspective. The fund financial statements are primarily for short-term use. That's where you live day to day. They're only talking about current assets and current liabilities. You see your long-term debt and your capital assets show up on the statement of net position. The income statement equivalent of that, next page please, Carl, is called a statement of activities or changes in the statement of net position. This is like an income statement on the full accrual basis of accounting. And that is all we have. If anybody has any questions, I would be delighted to try and answer them. And my standard spiel, this is not your only bite of the apple. If you have a question anytime during the year, call me. If I can't answer it on the phone, I'll be glad to come out and talk to you, and you don't get another bill for that. That's all part of our service, anytime.
Thank you so much, Ron. I
Thank
do
you.
have a question. I mentioned this to you previously. So when we go to this unassigned line, 3.9, that is basically what we call a reserve. And we're at 63%, and we're facing an extremely healthy budget upcoming that we're gonna have to lock in. And I know you can give us guidance, but you can't answer the question directly. 63 to me seems like an extremely strong reserve compared to other towns that I've heard of down around between 25 and 45. And if you look at our history here, we've gone up substantially since 2014, which our reserve in 2014 was, I can't do the math.
45%.
45, right. So we're probably gonna need to tap some reserves. We have two choices, either we're gonna raise taxes or tap reserves, or a combination of the both. So would it be prudent for the town to tap some of that reserve?
I don't see anything wrong with it. You know, 45% is a strong, healthy reserve. At that point, you had $2 million, and I like to talk in absolute dollars instead of percentages. You know, the commission gets to make the hard decisions. I just get to talk about the ways where you might evaluate it. You know, it's the rubber meets the road when you actually have to meet that decision. That's within your purview. But I would think not in terms of a percentage, but in terms of an absolute dollar amount. If we had a real disaster here, we need $1 million or $2 million. It's a lot of money. You can do a lot of fixing for $2 million, you know? So if you took 1.9 million out, you'd still have $2 million. And actually have a little more than that, because that 645,000 that's assigned, if you needed to, you could unassign that and use it. Someday later, when you build up some more, you could reassign it. I'll tell you what those things are assigned for. That's money that the town said, hey, you know, we kind of want to spend this on this at some point. There's 160,000 for self-insurance. That would definitely come in. If you had a disaster, you'd want to use that. You got 370,000 you've set aside for drainage projects, and another 115,000 for, you know, beautification around the town. So, you know, if I were in your shoes, I'd feel comfortable using any of those three, any or all of those three in case of a disaster. So you actually have another 645,000. That's another 13%. So now you're up to 76%, and I wouldn't feel bad at all if you're back at 45%, somewhere down in that range. You could take 20% off, I think, without, that's me, but
Yeah, thank you.
I don't live here and I don't have to write the checks, you know, it's like.
I understand. Anybody got questions?
No, only to
Sounds
say it was a clean opinion, and I think we should thank Tracy, because the revenue was within less than 1%, and the expenses were off by about 3.5% lower, but and one of it was contingency of like 1.7%, so missed that on 1.7. You don't get much closer than that on a budget, so good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Okay, Carla, want to read announcements?
The next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will be held on Monday, June 17th at 8 a.m. at Town Hall. The next budget meeting will be held on July 1st at 2 p.m. with a regular Town Commission meeting following at 6 p.m. at Town Hall. Town Hall will be closed Thursday, July 4th in observance of Independence Day. Residents, please be aware that the town is preparing for Census 2020. We will begin posting information soon on our website and bulletin boards for access by the public. We want to ensure all residents are prepared and well-informed that Census 2020 will be mostly online-based. We will continue to update residents on any upcoming changes or updates as we know them. Residents who wish to add their name to the email blast list to receive important town notification should sign up on the sheet provided on the counter in the lobby or notify the town clerk. Next on the agenda is public comment. The mayor will invite the public to speak to the commission on any item that is not printed on the agenda. Public comments on specific agenda items may be made later in the meeting when the items are taken up. There is a 3-minute individual limit for public comment that will be timed by the town clerk. Public comment is not meant to be a question and answer period, and there will be no dialogue. Anybody wishing to speak during public comment, please come up to the podium, print your name and address on the sheet provided, and state your name and address for the record.
Okay, public comment.
Good evening. Okay to start?
Yeah.
Melanie Rodriguez, 3 Fayette. I'm actually going to address something that's been part of the discussion, and it sounds like you've already made your decision. But living on Fayette, I know the discussion has been a crosswalk from Crown Colony leading into Fayette. Been to the other meetings. I've actually reached out to each one of you the beginning of April via email and heard from no one. Then I sent a registered letter to each one of you and heard from no one. So just to share the thoughts of our street, we are a small, dead-end street, small community, would like to enjoy our neighborhood. We love Crown Colony, which is enough foot traffic. However, we have foot traffic coming from both directions, people we don't know. We have small children on our street, a lot of strangers down our street. And I know at the last meeting, unfortunately, we couldn't make it. My husband was in the hospital, but we did listen to the minutes. It was stated that we're going to assume people would use the Beachway access. However, there is the yacht club that uses our street that has Beachway access. So, and then seeing the renovation of Beachway access, it looks like it's been made very private, hard to see, no bike racks, and then you go to the beach and there are 2 signs that say private, no trespassing. So it would stand to reason, our point of view, that people would turn around and go down our quiet, dead-end street looking for beach access. So we would just like our voice to be heard, because the decisions you make affect our lives. We are year-round residents. We are not just seasonal. We understand Crown Colony has the right to cross, but it's opening up our street to a lot of foot traffic, and not only that, car traffic. So we would like our voice to be heard. So no one reached out, no one spoke to us, no one answered emails, no one answered letters. So we really would just like the town to maybe think about how it affects our life. Beachway is the main street, I get it, but that access has been made very private. And with those signs, I'm wondering, are there gonna be signs all the way down the beach saying private, no trespassing? Because that's the way that access looks at this point. So that's our concern, and we're hoping the town will listen to our concerns and maybe consider our small dead-end street and our neighborhood as opposed to everyone else's neighborhood. So, thank you.
Mayor, permission to address Ms. Rodriguez?
Sure.
Permission? Would you give your phone number to the clerk so that we may contact you after the meeting?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Betty?
Betty Bingham, 1 East Ocean Avenue. I have a couple of housekeeping things. About this time of year, I always request $1 from the commission to pay for the rent of the sidewalk that is on our property. The main reason for that is the narrowest point on A1A, and as long as the state can't get a hold of it, they can't widen the road. And if they want to take our property, it'll cost them dearly. And it's not very big, but it's enough to keep that corner small. Number 2,
Do you get the money, or you just request it?
I just requested it. That is to let you know that the sidewalk is on our property, and I don't want it to go by eminent domain. Okay. Number 2, same problem. Are you aware that the 50 feet over there belongs to Ocean Ridge, and Whiten Beach has their picnic tables, et cetera, on it? Are they paying us rent for our property? And or should we request something to keep them from 7 years from now saying, oh, well, we've taken this property over, it doesn't belong to you all anymore. Just a thought in passing. And 1/3 bookkeeping. Many years ago, we worked very hard to get all the metal signs out of Ocean Ridge and put up wooden signs and cut down on the proliferation of obvious signs along the roadways. These aren't private. And I noticed that we're beginning to get bigger signs up. I think some of it comes because when people are being political, they can put up bigger signs than we had originally allowed to go up in town. And I just thought maybe you might like to keep an eye on metal signs going up for clean the roads up, whatever, so that we don't get a
Take
proliferation.
a look at the sign ordinance, Betty, the lawyer's in the process. And Wayne, could you maybe follow up on the picnic benches on our land? I don't understand that.
I will.
Public comment?
Yeah.
Thank you. Terry Brown, Harbor Drive South. I'm not going to say anything about Beachway public beach access because the young woman from Fayette said it all. It's private. Anyway, the reason why I came up here tonight was to encourage you. I had mentioned budget amendments, and your auditor just told you that that reserve you can grab a hold of and use. You don't need to wait. You can do it with a public notice, public meeting, and you can do these projects that are being dragged out forever. The one up in the drainage problem and the hydrogen problem, the fire hydrant problem. You can do it now. You don't need to wait until the budget season starts. Just make an amendment, pull the money out and do it, and you recover it with revenue later. Someone thanked me about that, by the way, for bringing it up. So this is the second time I'm bringing it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're all set in public comment? Okay, Carla, let's do the consent agenda.
Okay, to adopt minutes of regular town commission meeting of May 6, 2019, and adopt minutes of special town commission meeting of May 14, 2019.
You have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular town commission meeting of May 6, 2019. Can I put them both together or no?
Just a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay,
is
motion
all that's
to approve
necessary.
entire consent agenda.
Second.
Second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous, Carla. Okay, item number 2, appoint an alternate member of the Board of Adjustment. Tracy?
Yes, I'll be very brief. We currently have an alternate seat vacancy on the Board of Adjustment. We advertised for the position, and we received applications from John Lipscomb and Cindy Martell. So now it will be up to the commission to appoint a member.
Any commission thoughts? Public comment?
I encouraged John to run because he wanted to be involved in the city. He seems to be, has a good resume there, so I would suggest him.
I'll second. If we need a second to do that, I'll agree.
And that was a motion to appoint him,
I
so,
suggest I'm-
okay.
Thank you.
Anybody going to speak for Cindy? Longtime resident? Okay. All right, do we hear a motion?
You have a motion and
I
a
have a
second on the
motion and a
floor.
second.
So all those in favor of John Lipscomb being appointed an alternate Board of Adjustment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay? Nay. Okay, Bob Sloat. And I want to thank you for the amount of time you're spending on this.
Good evening, Bob Sloat, North Ocean Boulevard. I've contacted a number of insurance agencies, and Matt Reedy from Plastridge was the only one who did some research for us. So I'd like that to go on record. I'm thanking Matt for helping us. The bottom line, you should have a copy of his email to me. The bottom line is that it will have, if we do have our own zip code, it will have a net impact on our insurance rates. That's the positive news. The negative news is I've spoken to a number of people at the Boynton Beach Post Office, and they've shared with me that it is a long, arduous process to go through to get our own zip code, and including a survey of all of our residents to see if they want their zip code. And it may end up resulting in us having to have our own post office, our own delivery truck, and our own postmaster. And the suggestion was made to me by the local post office personnel that the commission contact Lois Frankel or Mike Caruso to find out if we can put any pressure on the postal authorities to expedite our request in looking at a zip code for Ocean Ridge. The problem is our population is anywhere between 17 and 1,800, and most zip codes are given to cities or towns of a population between 10 and 25,000 residents. So I share with the commission, I've done my job, and it's above my pay grade to talk to our representatives. And perhaps the one we should talk to, or you should talk to, is Lois Frankel, because this is a federal change, not a statewide change. So thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Bob, for all your hard work.
Do we want to discuss this a bit, the zip code? It sounds like it's running into a stone wall.
It does, but what would it hurt to reach out to Ms. Frankel there and just throw it out there, right? That would only take how much of our time?
We're
We
representatives
have
right
Lois
there.
I know
Frankel's
we-
representative here.
Can you
today.
speak on her behalf, or are you listening?
Well, I can't speak on her behalf, but I will take this information to our office. I'm Charity Lewis, I'm from Congresswoman Lois Frankel's office, and I just came here today.
To mind your own business.
Thank
Pass
you.
this forward.
Thank you, we appreciate that.
There you go.
Okay, agenda item number 4, resolution number 2019-09, a resolution of the Town Commission of the Town of Ocean Ridge establishing a septic to sewer advisory, citizens advisory.
I think he had a question on the last one, I think, post
Bob?
office.
Bob Weisblue, 23 Sailfish Lane. I've been listening with kind of interest to this change in zip code. I'm not quite sure I understand the benefit to most of the citizens, but I look at how hard it's going to be to change that information on every place that I have it registered, credit cards, all the internet sites, everything. It's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, we're exploring it. Let's put it that
Okay.
way. Yeah. Okay, I read number 4. Tracy?
At the May 6th Town Commission meeting, the Town Commission directed staff to prepare a resolution creating a septic to sewer citizens advisory committee, which was attached for your review. This agenda item is split into 2 parts. The commission should first entertain the motion on creating the advisory committee, and then open it up for nominations to appoint members to the committee, with each commissioner suggesting at least one person.
Okay. Do we have a motion on, what do you want, do we need to do discussion first? No. No, not really.
We've already pretty much discussed it, right?
I'll move for discussion purposes. I move to adopt resolution 2019-09 as submitted.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, I would prefer to go last because I think we probably all have the same names in our heads. And then I can just choose the last one, I'm guessing, from the various citizens that have approached me. So you want to start? with-
Alphabetical order? Okay, I nominate Roy Shines.
Oh, I'm getting next. Ron Kern.
I think you're up.
I know, I'm looking at my list.
Marking them all.
I'm sorry, Phil, I didn't understand the name.
Roy Shines. You want to stand up, Roy?
Right here. Oh, okay. Okay, good. Okay. Thank you.
Ron Kern.
Ron Kern.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I
I
got
hate
the
to have
easy
that
one.
title, but it's coming your way.
I'm going to nominate John Lipscomb on this committee.
Fine. Okay, Art Zev, who, some of you know, Art Zev, I've talked to Ron about this already. Art is a municipal funding expert that works in various states across America. So we're definitely gonna need funding help. So he's not a sewer expert, he's a funding expert who will join the committee. We're short a person, because we're short Christine.
She actually gave me her names, but I can't nominate for her. She suggested Neil Hennigan and Britt Flanagan. And Ron Kern, but he's already taken, so.
Britt Flanagan, I'm very familiar with.
Fine.
You good?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, what do you mean? Doesn't she have to nominate it? Are
Well,
we stuck here?
But we have 4 people left. So, can I nominate a second person at this point?
That's our question.
Your turn.
Right. No, I mean, the way that, I guess the way that it's set up is that each town commissioner shall select one member. Okay, so
But they do 4 today, and then when Christine gets back, fill the other member.
I think procedurally, well, I understand she provided the names, but she, she didn't select the member. I think procedurally, it would work better if we can do it, if she can make that selection when she gets back.
Okay.
It's fine.
So you can certainly proceed forward now with those.
The 4.
No, yes, with the 4 as well, if you want to proceed forward with those.
Ron, since you're the sewer expert, do you have any words of wisdom for us at this point?
Oh, my. No, it's actually a privilege to do it. Sounds like we've got a nice collection of people that would get an awful lot. I'd be interested in a little bit more about the exact charter, okay, timetables and things like that. It would be interesting to know that, and what the recommendation, when you would like a final report on the thoughts, because there's a short-term and a long-term goal of this. I mean, we've got short-term issues right now that are within the next 2 years, and then after that, it just goes all the way to, say, a 10-year plan.
The one thing that sent a little shiver through me was Representative Caruso said that we should have some documentation ready by the end of the summer.
I couldn't write that fast enough now. He does point that out, that for funding purposes, I'm not certain that you could have a town-wide plan in 2 months.
No. But he seemed to be telling us to get on the docket, so if,
Right.
yeah. Okay, thank you to everyone who volunteered.
Can I
Thank you.
comment, please? This is an action item. Thank you. Terry Brown. This is a good idea. People get to talk about moving the septic to sewer over to Boynton Beach and Delray. That's the only place it can go. You have some other grand scheme in your mind, it's not gonna go anywhere else but there. That's the South Central Regional Plan. As I mentioned once before, my concern about the committee is, do you have enough balance? We have condo people. This gentleman's a condo person. John is a condo person. You need to have a balance of residential people, old timers who are used to septic tank, to determine what impact that would have on them. So I don't know who you have on there that would be a resident, a single-family home resident.
Roy Shines.
Who is that?
Gentleman back here.
Okay, good. Where do you live?
111 Dolphin Bend.
Dolphin Bend, that's a good spot. You're the south end. But I just wanted to be sure that that was clear, that there needs to be a different perspective other than condos. We know that condos have been pushing for this for years, and they've been trying to get the town in their own way to pay for stuff that they're supposed to pay for, sewer and drainage. Thank you.
Okay, item number 5, second reading of ordinance.
You have to finish with.
We need a motion.
Yeah, you need a motion
A motion
to
to
appoint.
Approve,
those
Okay.
yes,
Yep.
yes.
All right, I'll make the motion. I move to appoint Roy Shines, Ron Kerr, John Lipscomb, and Art Zen to the Septic to Sewer Citizens Advisory Committee.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, second reading of ordinance number 2019-07. Carla, you want to read the ordinance?
Second reading and adoption of ordinance number 2019-07, an ordinance of the Town of Ocean Ridge, Florida, amending its code of ordinances by amending Chapter 63, General and Administrative Prohibitions, Article 4, Site Plan Reviews Procedures, Section 63-56, Concept Development Plan Review, to modify the process to provide that the Planning and Zoning Commission shall have approval and/or denial authority, and to provide for other criteria in an appeal process, providing for codification, repeal of conflicting ordinances, severability, and an effective date.
Ryan, you want to say more words on this?
Just very quickly, you adopted this on first reading. This changes the concept plan review to development plan review, where they do have then that committee or that board, which is the P&Z board, would have the authority to approve, deny, or approve with conditions a site plan presented to them. That decision could be appealed up to the town commission by an applicant or a property owner within 300 feet of the property that is under development. There was further review criteria added regarding height and scale. And we also modified some of the language regarding the threshold value. It may be determined by an appraisal obtained by the property owner. And this was worked on with Marty Miner, the town's planning consultant, as well.
Okay. Any commission discussion, public comment?
Thank you. Terry Brown. This won't take long, but one of the concerns, and I think it was brought up by Mark Marsh at the last planning and zoning meeting, that a lot of these houses that are now being, the tear downs and the rebuilds are beginning to look an awful lot alike. You know, the architects have a computer program, you have floor area ratio, lot size, and height size, and they push a button and they come up with a design. The two houses that are being built on our house look almost exactly the same, the one that's being proposed at number 18 and the one that's being finished up down the street. So the point that I think Mark Marsh was making, that this doesn't address anything about ending up with neighborhoods where all the houses look exactly the same. The great thing about Ocean Ridge, when we moved here 28 years ago, is that you had this diversity of property. You had big houses. That was the great thing about going to the garden club, is you could go to all these big houses and see all the great things that they had inside their house. And then you could go to smaller neighborhoods down the south end and the residential areas. So the point I'm trying to make is, do we want to look like a concrete box ticky-tack with a metal roof? Because that's what's happening. And that was the complaint, or a comment that he made about them looking all the same with metal roofs. So is there some way that somebody can steer that in another direction? Rick probably can make a comment.
Yes, Mark. I thought we already took care of this.
Oh, there's Mark, I didn't see him.
Sorry, my name in vain. Mark Marsh, 14 Hudson. First of all, I'd like to thank the commission for taking this seriously and adopting this ordinance. It's been a long time coming, and I think from town staff, the Planning and Zoning Commission, we all appreciate the support. As Mr. Brown said, part of what our review is to look at what I term similar and dissimilar. And by doing that, you have some say as to avoiding what we call cookie cutter type development in the town. So again, this has been a year and a half, and again, I think we'll benefit as a town and a community. I think the diversity that Mr. Brown mentioned is what attracted us here. So I think preserving it is our charge, and again, thank you.
Thank you for all the work P&Z did.
I think this is an excellent idea. I've been to almost all the P&Z meetings. I've had the privilege of getting up and having my say about it, so I would like to make the motion to adopt ordinance number 2019-07 on the second reading.
I think it's 08, isn't it? I got the wrong one.
07.
No, 07.
Oh, excuse me, yeah. Okay, second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Okay. Second reading of ordinance number 2019-08. Did I skip an item here? Agenda item 6. Okay, Carla?
An ordinance of the Town of Ocean Ridge, Florida, amending its code of ordinances by amending Chapter 64, zoning, Article 1, District Regulations, Section 64-1, RSF and RSE, single-family residential districts, Section 64-2, RMM, medium-density multifamily residential district, Section 64-4, RHM, high-density multifamily residential district, Article 2, planned residential development, Section 64-24, Development Standards, and Article 3, Supplemental Regulations, Section 64-50, Location of Exterior Residential Equipment and Accessory, to modify the regulations regarding screening of flat roofs and roofs accessories, providing for codification, repeal of conflicting ordinances, severability, and an effective date.
Okay, Brian, do you have any further advice?
Not really. We did, based on the comments, we adopted this, when this was adopted at the first reading, we said at that time we would be taking it back to P&Z to confirm with them that they were okay with some of the minor changes made by staff. They were, so that's, they did not recommend any other changes from first reading.
Okay, any public comment on this? All right, commission discussion? Okay, do I hear a motion?
All right, I move to adopt ordinance number 2019-08 on second reading.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Item number 7, first reading of ordinance number 2019-09. Carla, you're up again.
An ordinance of the Town of Ocean Ridge, Florida, amending the comprehensive plan of the Town of Ocean Ridge, which amendment is more fully described in Exhibit A attached hereto in accordance with the Local Government Comprehensive Planning and Land Development Regulation Act, as amended, being sections 163.3161, Sec. Florida statutes, providing for an amendment of the town's future land use element, coastal management element, conservation element, and recreation and open space element pursuant to the comprehensive land use amendment laws of the state of Florida,
Okay.
for the purpose of implementing regulations regarding environmentally sensitive areas, sea level rise, and recreation and park space, providing for repeal of all ordinances in conflict, providing for severability, providing for directions to the town clerk, providing an effective date, and providing for other purposes.
Okay, Brian, I think this is, we have Marty here.
Yes, actually, I'll defer to Mr. Minor.
Good evening. For the record, Marty Minor, Urban Design Kildare Studios. I was here a little more than a year ago to start this process. This process started because state law requires each community to update their comprehensive plan. Smaller communities like Ocean Ridge can't opt out of it. However, you must address all the code changes. There's one code change in the state statutes that the state want us to address, and that was on addressing sea level rise. And that is largely in the coastal management element of your comprehensive plan. As we go through the process, and there's been lots of discussions, and staff in the Planning and Zoning Board has been just exemplary. You have a high-quality board that you should be very proud of. It's not all communities have that kind of expertise on their board. So you're very lucky. So we worked through that process, and in addition to amending the coastal management element, we're also amending the future land use element, the conservation element, and the parks and recreation. And just briefly going through this, the future land use elements, we've added several policies to address environmental factors. Specifically, if someone comes in with a redevelopment plan or just plain development plan of green area that contains sensitive vegetation or wildlife, they will have to create and produce an environmental assessment for the town to review as part of the development review process. It wasn't included in your comprehensive plan before. We are now going to be requiring that. Several of the coastal element factors that we looked at to address sea level rise especially creating resiliency in the structures that are built in the town. That has been added to the future land use element. We've also updated several things like the population estimates in the town and going forward. Currently, we're about 1,800 people here in the town. And then another requirement that any new subdivisions or redevelopments, things after a storm, that the street widths and pavement widths match the code. It wasn't included before, and so we've addressed it here. The coastal management element, we go, as you can see in the memo before you, there's probably 20 different changes into the coastal management area, looking at ways to address sea level rise, especially as things move forward in redevelopment of the town, that they'll have to address those type of factors. There's also several policies that calls for studies. Some of that is already starting to occur with various town officials, but this memorializes this and keeps the town moving forward in compliance with the state's requirements. Conservation easements, several of the environmentally sensitive aspects and requirements that we included in the future land use elements, now in the conservation elements. And on the recreation and open space, we updated the population estimates and included a public parks requirement. So if you have a new subdivision and any of the new units, they would be required to dedicate 600 square feet per new unit. And they can also, there's a provision where you can submit money instead of dedicating that. And that money would go to the town for recreational purposes. This is only for new units, so if I had a very large lot with several acres and I decided to divide it up into 3 or 4 lots, let's say 4 lots, the 3 additional units would fall under this requirement, and I would have to provide 1,800 square feet of public park or the monetary equivalent to the town as part of the development review process. This is the first reading as part of the process for comprehensive plans. After the first reading, if you decide to move this forward on first reading, it goes up, I will package it all up, send it up to the state, Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, all the state departments of DOT, DEP, all those fine folks, and they have 60 days to give us comments back to us. And then when we come back for the second reading, those comments will be before you. We can incorporate those, we can ignore those. That is up to you, but we'll get to that step at the second reading. But for here, the first reading, that's it. If you have any questions, I appreciate your attention and your input. Thank you.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
My
While
turn
we have
for
Marty,
questions?
we'll do the
Okay.
questions and we'll do public comment.
The 1,730 units that you kind of estimate, that should be our cap.
Yes.
Are we close to that? Like, how many do we have now?
We have around 1,600.
1,600?
We did a
Okay.
count.
Okay. So 1,730 seems pretty
It was
reasonable
fine.
to
That
you.
was,
Yeah.
that's the number that exists in the current comp plan. And so we did a count to make sure we're not going to get in trouble with that.
Okay.
There is room.
So
Okay.
there's only one thing in here that raised my eyebrows. It was demolition permits, if any applicable historic structures are in town. So I don't think we're interested in creating historic structures. Is this something the state presses upon us, or?
Yeah, it is one of the requirements for the future land use. Is that what you're looking at? Which,
Objective 5.1 on page 1-5.
okay.
It says, maintain land development regulations include a provision that assures special review of any renovation or demolition
Yeah.
permit application of any applicable historic structures.
That is a state requirement, and that's on the within the existing comprehensive plan. We're not proposing to change that, and we're not proposing for us to change any of our actions as the town.
Good, okay. And just a great note perhaps for Wayne, this all-new automatic irrigation systems be equipped with a water sensing device. That would be something, if somebody's doing like a reno on their irrigation system, that we should encourage. Because it is crazy when we get flooding in town and we get all these sprinklers going on.
I have another question. At our last budget meeting, we passed the vulnerability study. And then you have a policy 2.17, talking about participate in a regional government study to evaluate the town vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
I don't know, are you familiar with the vulnerability study? And Don knows more about it than all of us, but you have like A through H. And it'd be nice if we kind of coordinate with what the study that we're gonna pay for kind of matches what you're gonna propose, what we're gonna do, so we don't have to pay for another study or, you know, whatever.
Totally understand. We can coordinate and look at and make sure we're all on the same dance card.
Okay.
We're in the process right now with the CRP in developing a RFP or an RFQ to try to hire the firm that will be doing the vulnerability studies for those communities that are involved. We also have an interlocal agreement that I've given to council to review to make sure that it's applicable and will work for Ocean Ridge as well as the other communities. And so what my hope is that what we put in the comp plan and the vulnerability study that we'll be doing in 2020 will go hand in glove.
Yeah.
We have not committed to the vulnerability study, just so we're clear on that.
Well, we moved it to the
It's in the
second.
budget.
We
It's
moved
in
it
the
forward.
budget.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right, we moved it forward.
Okay, thank you.
I had a couple questions.
Sorry?
I had a couple. Okay, we were talking about the historic point, because I saw that as well. Do we have any historically designated buildings in the town?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not in, I
no.
know we have no district, but we don't have anything. Well, no, you don't want a district, but an individual, nothing is, nothing is.
House is historic.
Which one?
Yeah, that's,
Is
on
it
Anna
listed?
Street, on Anna.
Is it listed? Okay, well, that's something to know when you're discussing, that we actually have something that is listed with the state, right? And my other question was, where we're talking about revising policy 4.1 to require identification of flora and fauna to be identified during developmental review process. Developmental review process will now be our new P and Z, correct? So then this comes before P and Z about the flora and fauna. Do we have, what do they use to work with that? Do we have any kind of something from EPA which specifically says,
State.
right? They have to work within what the state puts down,
With
right?
the state regulations.
And the development needs to tell them before they go anywhere forward. I mean, none of this, let's mow our lawn and then come and tell you that we want to
That is
preserve,
correct.
right?
That
So
is
it's all
correct.
part of P and Z's
This
new
is
thing.
capturing it before any
Right.
development goes on.
That's what I wanted to check.
And if it's a rezoning or a multifamily, they will all come to you too.
Right, right.
Before approval, so.
Okay, so this is all part of the new P and Z. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Public
Thank
comment?
you, Barney.
Well, there used to be about 6
You gotta do the whole thing, Karen.
Oh, yes, come on now.
Since we're talking history, we have Karen here.
Karen Hansack, prior town clerk. We used to have about 6 homes that were on a potential list for historic homes, but they chose not,
To have them designated.
yeah, they didn't want them designated. So
protected.
the last one was the Schwab House, and
Oh, that's,
that was,
I
that was
remember
good.
when that one went down.
But there were like six on it.
Right, because if it's going individually, it has to be the private owner who wants to go forward with it.
Right.
That's a great question. Is that true, Marty? In other words, no one can press historic designation on you. You have
It
to
has to be
request
the owner, right, because they can get a district.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, the town came up with the names at some point, but
Hoping.
then
But you
they,
have to get everybody, I know how this goes, you have to go down that road and get everybody to agree, because there are tax breaks and what have you, but we don't really have a district. I was just wondering individually.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Karen.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Anybody want to make a motion?
Well, I'll move that we approve the comprehensive plan on the first reading as discussed by Marty Minor,
Number 2019-09.
Oh, no.
number 2019-09.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay, moving to item 8. Agenda item 8, first reading of ordinance number 2019-10. Carla?
An ordinance of the Town of Ocean Ridge, Florida, amending its code of ordinances by amending Chapter 64 zoning, Article 3 supplemental regulations, and Section 64-50 location of exterior residential equipment and accessories to modify the setback requirements for generators, providing for codification, repeal of conflicting ordinances, severability, and an effective date.
Okay, can you put that slide, you added in a slide so everyone can see what's going on. Okay, any public comment? This is pretty straightforward. Commission discussion?
Can you explain the slide, please?
Yes. I'm going to turn this over to Wayne because he and I had quite a bit of debate on what we're really talking about is where the generator goes as opposed to the exhaust of the generator. So I'll let Wayne explain.
The code as it currently stands indicated that generators may be placed a minimum of 5 feet from any window or doors or neighboring properties. The code, due to carbon monoxide poisoning and incidents that have happened, the building code recommends, or the building code states 10 feet from any window and doors. So in order to have our local ordinance in compliance with what the building code is, we try to attain the 10 feet from an opening, and that's what that first, that diagonal arrow. The yellow represents a structure, and the blank represents openings. What we try to do is then, on a 15-foot setback requirement, where would this exhaust for the generator be located, not the generator itself. And as such, what we try to do is do a 10 and 10. So the generator can be closer to the structure, but it cannot be within 10 feet of an opening. So we're able to identify that here, and then still at the same token, maintain a separation from the property line, which would be 10 feet from the property line and 10 feet from an opening. So that's what that diagram is illustrating. We took this back to P&Z already the first time around because of the various discussions that we were having. And again, we've tweaked this a little bit. What P&Z had suggested to bring this before you had the word permanent generators. We neglected to, meaning the word exhaust was not included in the document. So that would be one of the recommendations to include that after the word permanent generator, which would have been permanent generator exhaust discharge shall be placed a minimum of. And again, 10 feet from the windows and doors, and still along a minimum of 10 foot for the setback requirement. Now again, this is first reading, so this will go back to P&Z on the June 17th meeting if they're okay with these changes, or we kick everything back to P&Z and come back again. So the choice would be the commissioners.
Really, the only change that we made in the ordinance that it's written, as Wayne said, there's a sentence in there that says, additionally, permanent generators shall be placed a minimum of 10 feet from all windows and so on and so forth. And I got into, I drew it all out in drawings and everything else, and how are you going to get a generator, 10 foot and whatnot? And what they didn't have in the ordinance was the word exhaust. So all we're doing is we'll approve it on the first reading, take it back to P&Z, and have them approve the word exhaust, which is the exhaust pipe from the generator that needs to be 10 feet from a window or the structure.
Does that work, Brian?
Well, I guess I've just got a question. I just want to make sure I'm clear. on this, because under subsection C, we have a generator shall be allowed in a required side or rear yard, provided it is set back a minimum of 5 feet. You're proposing to change that to 10 feet.
I'm proposing to change that to 10 feet,
Okay,
as well.
okay, now if I can, so is that just the generator exhaust, or is that the whole
Generator exhaust.
generator?
That's the generator exhaust.
So the generator exhaust, so a generator exhaust shall be allowed in a required side or rear yard setback, provided it is set back a minimum of 10 feet from the property line.
Correct.
So the exhaust has to be 10 feet from the property line.
That's correct.
Okay, but the body of the generator, let's say it's 6 feet long, it can extend closer to the property line.
Provided that the exhaust itself cannot be closer than 10 feet from a property line.
Right, so you could flip
So
it.
currently-
So you could put the generator closer to the property line, have the exhaust go to your own house, and as long as it doesn't go within 10 feet of an open space, you're fine, right?
Right, I'm doing 10 and 10 on both sides, because currently, right now, the generator can sit 5 feet from a property line. So that entire generator will be no closer than 5 feet from the property line. However, the exhaust is, again, it'll be able to try to make sure that it sits in that area.
I can't,
And also,
no, go ahead.
and also in addition to that, we've addressed screening.
Right.
And making sure it's screened from view. The dilemma of trying to do this was try to make sure that it doesn't affect your neighbor. You still have a generator, but at the same token, making sure it's not too close to your home where you've got carbon monoxide poisoning as a hazard that could be there. So,
And this would give you the 25 feet between your neighbor's house and the exhaust of your generator.
yeah.
So I can't tell you the exact language
Still
now,
confused.
but the intent, well, the intent is that the generator body itself shall be no closer than 5 feet to the side property line. However, we're requiring the exhaust portion to be no closer than 10 feet to the side property line. And also the exhaust can't be any closer than 10 feet to windows and doors. So I understand it appears that that's the intent that you are looking at. So we will wordsmith this and.
So we can vote on the intent?
Yes, I mean, yes, that is what we are looking at, so there'll be just some minor changes to that. You can vote on that, we'll take that back to P and Z at their next meeting, and then we'll bring it back, depending on what they say, we'll bring it back to you for second reading.
Can I make a comment?
No, we're getting public comment.
Lisa Rototo, 4 Hudson Avenue. Okay, I'm a little confused because we only have 15-foot setback on our property, so are we an exception to the rule?
No, that's why I use the 15 foot as
Because if you're
as an
trying to change
example.
it 10 and 10, we can't make another 5 feet
No,
from somewhere.
the generator itself will be closer. The generator itself will not be, will be closer to the structure is what ends up happening, as what mostly happens anyway. You're anywhere between 3 to 5 feet from the actual structure because that's where the electric meters and transfer switches are. However, the actual exhaust of the generator itself, you're not gonna look at it, even though it's more of an angle, you're not gonna put the generator right in front of that as an example. It'll be set back. It'll be closer to here, but but further away from the property.
Yeah, no, I get all of that, but when you
Yeah.
started talking 10 and 10, I thought, okay, well,
Yeah,
where's the extra
it's
5
based-
going?
it's still based on
Thank
15.
you.
It's based on 15 feet for the setback.
You're covered.
Not to confuse things a little
Yeah.
more, but I've seen these installed near the building, but the exhaust is piped above the roof. The stainless steel, in a car, it has an exhaust pipe, and it's fitted to the side of the structure, and the exhaust goes up, not going anywhere near a window or anyone else's house. So you could grant an exception if it was piped, if the exhaust was piped away. I've seen that.
They have done that, and they also have various, it'll be all determined in the permitting process, but the object is to keep it.
So you could grant an
yes.
exception if it was
If
private?
it's private,
Thank you.
yes.
But actually, if you think about that, then you're gonna be bumping into your 10-foot rule.
Right.
Otherwise, we're gonna have to allow pipes to stick 10 feet above houses. You
And
see what I mean?
Yeah,
Maybe this should go back to P and Z for a little more chit chat.
that's fine.
Well, I've had discussions with Wayne, and I think he's between a rock and a hard spot, going back to P and Z without the first reading.
Then we could
as far as
reword it then, but we gotta take care of this Terry Brown problem. It's a
Exactly.
valid point.
Yeah.
The possible exceptions.
Yeah.
We need to fix the wording a little bit more, and that's why we're gonna want to take it back there.
Okay.
For that, but currently, the way the ordinance stands is not good. And that's why I wanted to address that issue. Because the way the current ordinance stands, a generator is sitting 5 feet from a property line, and also 5 feet, has the option to be 5 feet from a window or door, which is really too close.
We all agree that we need to change the ordinance, just a matter of coming up with a word and
Correct.
making sure we don't trip another wire
I'm with you.
inadvertently. Okay.
Yes.
So we're gonna move on from that, item number 8?
So are you going to reject this ordinance and
gonna be
send it
reworded.
to P and Z for reword, for re?
Well, I
Redo?
guess, do you want to postpone this ordinance? And that will give us time to take it back to P and Z, and then we can come back to you for first reading at your July meeting. Would that work?
That's fine.
For you?
We got June 17th, we'll take it back to that.
Okay.
Wayne, are we realistically going to have time to put it on the June 17th P and Z meeting agenda?
I can do that. I'll have to get it done this week. For it to be on the agenda. So yes,
Okay.
I'll have something for P and Z for the June 17th meeting.
Okay, moving on to,
Well,
Do we have to table? it?
right, I mean, is that I guess we'll need somebody to make a motion to postpone it in a second and then vote on it.
somebody wanna make, what, we're postponing it till the July 1 meeting?
I would rather you not do a date. You didn't advertise this, did you, Tracy?
No, not
Okay,
until
so
second
just
reading.
say postpone, just move to postpone.
So we have
That's it.
a motion to postpone.
I move to postpone ordinance number 2019-10 on its first reading.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So it's 3-1. Okay, item number,
10?
no, it can't.
9.
Nine.
It actually says 8, but it can't write. First reading of ordinance 2019 -11.
An ordinance of the Town of Ocean Ridge, Florida, amending its Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 66, Environmental Regulations, Article 4, Landscaping, Division 3, Tree Permits, to modify the regulations regarding tree permits and to provide for the trimming of coconuts, providing for codification, repeal of conflict ordinances, severability, and an effective date.
Okay, this falls to Wayne again, or is it Brian, or?
Well, I'll just very quickly on this, it provides for a duty to trim coconut trees and to provide that it must be done by July 1st so that they're free of coconuts, coconut blooms, dead or dying palm fronds. And the other thing that is added in here, just under another section, regarding permit required, I put the exception in there as allowed by Florida Statute 163.045, because if that is signed by the governor, which I think it will be, then if someone provides certain documentation, then they will not be required to get a permit from us to remove a tree. So that's a new state law that will go into effect on July 1st. So we're addressing that in this ordinance as well.
Okay.
So that's the gist of this. I don't know if Wayne or Tracy wants to add anything else to that.
Wayne? Public comment?
Ted Ritoda, 4 Hudson. Can you clarify for me, does this mean that we're going to need to have all coconut trees trimmed by July 1st and have a permit to do it?
I don't think you need, currently, I don't think you need a permit to trim it, but it will require by July 1st, that's what it says, you're going to need to trim your coconut, to have the coconuts removed. That's what the ordinance is proposing. Proposing, yes.
Is it my understanding this would be effective this year?
We did talk about that a little bit, and we had, because this is not going to be adopted until after July 1st. So I'm not quite sure how it can apply to this year. So unless the commission, which brings up a good point, unless the commission wants to say, in which we can on the effective date, or we can add some language to the ordinance to say, however, we understand that this is going to be adopted after July 1st this year, then by October 1 or by August 1, you need to have it trimmed. So that's entirely up to the commission if they want to do something like that. But otherwise, this would not be applicable for this year because it's going to be after July 1st when this is adopted.
So we could word that.
Yes, we can propose some wording in here if you want to, where it may not be in the ordinance, but it'll be in the kind of the effective date that, I would have to think about depending on what your conversation is, but we could provide that for this particular year. If you want to make it effective, we could add another date. Of course, that date would be after your second reading on July 1st, and I would suggest that, you give everybody at least a month, if not longer, to comply, because this is a brand new, requirement, so.
I think
Does it also include Norfolk Island pines?
Well, I think that in reading this, Ted, it looks like they're talking about, and I'm glad you brought it up, they're talking about removing the coconuts by July 1, but they provided a change to the code based on changes in state statutes where they're talking about having an arborist remove trees. They're not talking about having to get a permit or an arborist to remove the coconut. I think this is a separate section.
It is.
If you
It
have
is.
a hardwood tree
Right.
or whatnot that has diseased or whatnot that you want removed from your property, then you can get that approved by an arborist and get it done. So there's really 2 sections that we're talking about here.
Yes, that is right. You aren't required to get a permit to trim your coconuts.
Good. That's a good thing. I got 13 on one piece of property. Thank you.
So I had a question on the second half, not the coconut. Well, I had something on the coconut part, which the chief, it's kind of a strange question. So I have lots of coconut trees. One tree is going to be fully ripe by July 1, and the other tree's not, and it won't be ripe until July 15th. So what would you do in that case? If I applied to you and said, hey, I want to wait 2 more weeks, because we do eat our coconuts, but they're going to be 2 weeks shy.
Mr. Attorney, do you have an opinion on that?
Well,
This is a dilemma with this particular ordinance that came to staff's as a major concern, and that is if we mandate a specific date, we've been under the impression from some arborists and some residents that there are 2, if not 3 cycles of coconuts in the course of the year. So you're trimming your coconut trees by June 1st was the initial discussion, may not get us to where we want to be on September the 1st if we have a hurricane. So we've tried to make the ordinance as generic as possible and hopes that the town's residents will comply. And I think just like any other ordinance, we would try and work with you if there is some definitive, we have the arborist coming out or a tree trimmer coming out within a week to take care of this. We're asking for voluntary compliance, and in hopes that we don't have to go after anybody in this. So I don't know, the way the ordinance is written, you would be in violation. The way the enforcement is handled, would be with discretion, I would hope.
Right, that we encourage. My second question, where it says, the non-coconut part of this, permit required, except as herein provided. It shall be unlawful for any person to cut down, damage, destroy, move, or remove any tree, or to authorize the same without first obtaining a tree removal permit. A permit is not the same as approval. There's no approval attached to this, correct?
Well, no, I think there would be, because I imagine staff would look at it and go, well, wait a minute, we don't want to give you a permit for the removal of this tree because of whatever reason, I don't know, but, I mean, it could be the same thing as with any other permit that we, that the town grants. If you meet all the requirements, then you get the permit. If you don't meet the requirements, then you wouldn't.
So this is a much more serious ordinance than perhaps everyone's thinking.
Well, I mean, this is already in the ordinance right now. This is not a change. The only thing I did was I just kind of weakened it a little bit by adding that language in there because that's what the state statute provides, that, where a lot of municipalities have ordinances such as this, that they require permits for tree removal, then the state statute, the state legislature has said, look, if you have an arborist who says that the tree is diseased, damaged, or creates a dangerous condition, I think those are the primary criteria, then you as the property owner can remove it without a permit from the town.
Okay, specifically, because I'm getting confused here, Brian, 66-151A, permit required.
That's always been in the code.
Even the permit
Yes.
required?
Yes, it's always been there.
Yes.
Okay. So what are we, other than coconut, what are we getting out of here?
Adding the statute, right?
That's right. The only thing that I modified on this one section here was to incorporate the new state statute. That's it.
Just the section that's underlined.
That's right, just the underlying portion. Because that provides that we do not have to, that we do not have the ability then to, or we cannot require a permit if the property owner has an arborist who says, look, this tree is diseased, damaged, or is dangerous, or something like that. I think that's the criteria. Then they can go ahead and just have it removed without getting a permit from us.
Yeah, because it's meeting that statute.
That's right. It's meeting the statutory guidelines,
Right.
so they don't have to come to us.
But those are specific, so it's not like you're just throwing it out, so.
Yes, Chief.
I would look at this as a preemptive strike and not having to bring an ordinance back to you again. We already know that this is likely to be in effect, and so we're correcting our ordinance to meet that ahead of time.
And if for some reason it's not adopted on July 1st for second reading, we'll just pull it out. So,
Okay.
yes.
Comment, please, sir. You're still in public comment? Regarding coconut palms? Oh, you want to come back? Does this requirement apply to the town? There are all kinds of coconut palms that are on town right-of-way that are not the property owners. Coconut Lane, all those coconuts were planted by,
Yes.
okay,
We have
so the
money in
town will be
budget
doing
for
the trimming
coconut
as well?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay.
We have
So
money
when
in
they
the budget
become
for that.
airborne, we'll know where to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
The
won't
oth-
be.
The other thing, we'll mark them, you could coat them, with a little X that came from the town. But the other thing is that there's some dead coconut palms on the dune in front of the Simon House that have been there for a long time, 3 dead ones. Who's gonna take those out?
Ted?
Can we assume, Chief, that if someone hasn't done it by the deadline, that they will get a warning first?
Unless you live on Hudson.
If you're asking for a friend.
Well, we eat them too. So there's some reason why I would want them on the tree up to a certain extent. Let me finish.
It is our intent to go through the same process we do with trees and wires and with any other code violation, and that is to make the homeowner aware of what we have observed and ask for them to comply in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Okay. So, any more commission comments on coconuts?
Enough of coconuts.
Okay, so, Brian, you're gonna have to help us here. We need to make a motion Can we just make a motion on the ordinance, because it doesn't mention the,
Yes,
Just make a motion to approve ordinance number 2019-11.
on first reading.
Yes.
somebody want to make that motion?
I'll
But-
move to adopt ordinance number 2019-11 on first read.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that was unanimous. All right, item number 10, resolution number 2019-10. This is what, it flipped. Okay. We just did 2019-11. All right, 2019-10, a resolution of the Town Commission of the Town of Ocean Ridge amending the adopted schedule of fees. Tracy?
Yes, the Town Commission adopted a fee schedule on September 6, 2018, and Building Department staff has since noticed that a few items need to be added to the fees to adequately cover the actual costs of the town. The amended fee schedule was included in your meeting packages as Appendix A, and the additions were highlighted in yellow. And we would like you to
Quiet, please.
adopt that as
Quiet,
submitted.
please. Terry? Okay.
And that's it.
Okay, this is pretty much
Can you
straightforward.
put that up, Carla, so the residents can see it? The schedule, yeah. There you go.
Wayne, you want to add anything to this?
I just want to add, with the new plan review process and development plan review, we wanted to make sure that any applicants that weren't able to be approved the first time around wanted to resubmit, had a conduit in which to do that, and wanted to make sure they got a reduction in the fees when they resubmitted. So that's where you see that $900 resubmittal fee versus the $1,500 itemized.
Okay.
And then when you see the word development, and it's highlighted in yellow, that is just a change from the word concept plan review to development plan review.
All right, public comment? It's pretty straightforward. Commission comments?
No? You want
No?
to take a
All right,
motion?
your motion?
I move to adopt resolution 2019-10, amending the town fee schedule effective immediately.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, moving on to item 11.
This might be a problem. Christine's not here, but I imagine
Yeah.
she'll accept
It won't
it,
be,
right? Okay.
I'm gonna change something up here. This is for a designation of voting delegate for the Florida League of Cities annual meeting. The Town Commission recently designated Commissioner DeHasseth as their primary voting delegate, and the rest of the Town Commission and Town Manager as the alternate voting delegates for the Palm Beach County League of Cities, who are authorized to vote on behalf of the town on municipal public policy matters. The request in front of you today is to designate those delegates for the Florida League of Cities annual meeting, and staff recommends that the commission appoint the full commission and the acting town manager, so that anyone who registers to attend the 2019 annual conference is eligible to take on that role of delegates for official business. So far, Commissioner Hurlbert is the only person who has registered to attend at this time. So I would suggest that we name her as the primary voting delegate, because we know she's attending, and then all of the others as the alternates, just in case.
Does it work for you?
That's fine.
Any public comment? Phil, you had a concern? Or are we good?
No, it was
We're good.
Christine originally, that's why.
Right,
Okay.
switched it up.
Okay, can we have a motion on this then?
I move to appoint Susan Holbert as the town designated voting delegate to the Florida League of Cities with the full town commission acting town manager as voting delegates for the Florida League of Cities annual conference, August 15th through the 17th, 2019.
I'll second it.
Great. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Have fun.
Yeah, great.
Okay, town managers report.
I'm gonna try to keep this brief. I do have quite a bit, though. We are having a special town commission meeting for July 1st at 2 p.m. for a budget workshop, and I just wanted to make all the residents aware that we're holding that. We only had about a handful of people come to the last one, and we really encourage participation in our budget process. The work on Beachway crossover is now complete. We hope the public enjoys the new configuration. We're currently looking at a handrail enhancement for the stairway, and we have received an offer for a donation, and I'm looking into that at this time. The white poles and the yellow rope that are currently in place there are to keep people from trampling the seagrass, and we realize it's an eyesore, but it is protecting the town's investment at this time. So we just ask for your patience until we can remove those. The fire hydrants have been our main priority, as you all know, over the last several weeks, and the city of Boynton Beach is currently satisfied with the town's plan as we move forward to maintain those on a continual basis. Staff, in conjunction with our contractor, have repaired as many as possible and will continue over the next several weeks and beyond to make sure the residents are safe in Ocean Ridge. The City of Boynton Beach Fire Marshal was in Ocean Ridge recently conducting sampling of hydrant flow testing with our Public Works employee, and the flow rates are sufficient at this time, which is really good news and a big relief for us. The next item, Lieutenant McClure and I attended the 34th Annual Traffic Safety Committee Annual Awards Luncheon last week, where Officer Nubia Plesnik received a Distinguished Service Award for enforcement. It was noted that she was instrumental in removing a great deal of drugs from our streets, and we want to thank Officer Plesnik for her hard work in keeping Ocean Ridge safe and free of drugs for our residents. A time clock for a public comment section has been suggested by a commissioner, and we're going to look into purchasing one if we can get a consensus from the commission to do so. The cost for that will be about $100. So I will just kind of want to open it up to the commission to see what their pleasure is on that item.
I'm not a fan of time clocks,
Yeah.
but other people might be.
Well, if we're having the 3-minute time, do we really need a clock versus Carla's phone or what have you, which basically just kind of, which basically lets you know, or are you all thinking that, you know, how it works at the regular debates where the person speaking actually gets a chance to see he has, 20 seconds to try and wind it up.
Yeah,
Right, so I
that's the
understand.
intent, yeah.
Right.
The other thing is sometimes a citizen has great passion about a specific subject. Like,
Absolutely.
let's say coconuts went on more than 3 minutes. That would have been okay because it affects our lives.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, Betty?
How about getting an egg timer? That's
And it only costs $5.
You had one.
Somebody stole it. Tracy?
Yeah.
You could just put it down, a 3-minute timer on the screen, at no cost.
So maybe we'll pass on the $100 timer until further notice?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, I interrupted you, Tracy.
Not a problem. We'll move forward. The Palm Beach County League of Cities hosts a District 4 luncheon on a regular basis, and they're always looking for towns to host those meetings. And I wanted to check to see if the commission was willing to allocate some funds in order to host one of those meetings in town. It would cost around $500 for that.
You're a League of Cities person.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea because we go every place else, right? Pay our share, so to speak. Yeah, we are the free. So that might be a nice thing to, as you say, showcase our town and take part, right? Take our part.
Okay.
So if there's consensus,
have
we can try to
consensus?
set that up with the
Bill
League of
and Don?
Cities.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm fine with
okay,
it.
consensus.
Okay. And the Blue Star Memorial Marker unveiling ceremony was held on Memorial Day. Some of you were in attendance. It was an outstanding town event. It was really great. We had a lot of great guest speakers, and some of the speeches were extremely moving. We received many positive comments from residents on that, and we want to thank Dr. Lynn Allison and Mrs. Barbara Cook, as well as the Garden Club President Mary Ann Cody, and all of the members of the Garden Club who took part in that and participated in planning that event. It was a great event for town. My hope is that we can hold more events like that in the future. And then last but not least, Mr. George Gann of the Institute for Regional Conservation was out at the dunes today conducting an assessment of the dune restoration project for Ocean Ridge using some grant funds that were received for Southern Palm Beach County. We will invite Mr. Gann to report back to the commission at the July meeting.
Great. And there's money involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, free money.
Yeah, it's a big grant.
Okay, any questions for Tracy? Good? Okay. Town attorney?
No report.
Good. Police chief?
The April 2019 monthly report for police and fire is attached. Be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Barring any, please remember, school is out. Our incidents of petty crimes, such as thefts from unlocked vehicles and theft of vehicles with the keys left in them, tend to rise at this point in time. The county is seeing a uptick in those crimes in the last 3 days. We are coming to hurricane season. We will begin doing our tree and wire inspection and contacting our homeowners and asking if they trim anything that touches a utility line. That includes Comcast, AT&T, and FP&L. If you have something on your property or a tree that emanates from your property that touches an FP&L line, I encourage you to contact FP&L and get a licensed contractor to handle that so as not to endanger your the public's health and safety, and so that you don't get killed in the process. The Civic Ready application that you voted on is in the process of getting launched, hopefully at the end of this week. When we are fully up and running and we have done our successful test, we will be putting it out through the website, the email blast, and other available media to try and encourage residents to sign up so that we can better inform you during the next hurricane season and of anything that may come along that would infect you, such as the water main breaks that we've had where we've had to divert traffic, so as you can avoid having to go through Manalapan to Ocean Ridge, turn around, and go back to get home. We hope that that's up and running by Friday. Last commission meeting, you requested that I look into a no-wake zone for the area of south of Woolbright Bridge through and just north of Ocean Avenue Bridge. I made a request to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission, and that request has been forwarded to the Florida Department of Transportation and the U.S. Coast Guard. It is currently in the hands of the U.S. Coast Guard. They have stated that they will look at it and give me an opinion based upon traffic and historic perspective. It's been requested numerous times before. It was sent 2 weeks ago. They told me not to expect any response for at least a month, just to keep you informed. If you don't have any other questions, that concludes.
Questions?
No.
Building official,
Oh, shoot. There was a public comment.
yes, Christine, didn't see it there, sorry.
Christine Schulte, 7 Adams Road. I just wanted an update. Did we discuss before that the chief would know? A while back about the EMT service. How long is it taking now? It used to be 9 minutes a few months ago, and apparently they were working on that to reduce it.
So the average response is around 7 minutes.
7 minutes now.
There are anomalies based upon traffic and some of the calls that we see in here for 10-minute response times. The fire chief responds immediately now to me, anything over 9 minutes, as to why. Sometimes it's someone not clocking the time correctly, but the response is. Sometimes it has to do with prioritization of calls. We do good, what we call good service calls, basically, which is somebody needs assistance from a firefighter for something that's not a medical emergency or not a dire emergency. Those get prioritized down, and they don't rush out and come with lights and sirens. The only thing that I can...
Is that an average time?
Average
Good
is about
time?
average is about 7 minutes, which is From what I can see from being a member of the Fire Service Committee with Florida League of Cities and Palm Beach County League of Cities, kind of an average that's acceptable now. Our response time to your emergency, when we receive it, is much less. We respond the police department responds as first responders, so there is generally someone there well before the fire department arrives, generally within 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah,
We
the police,
prioritize
yes.
that. And we try and triage, and if there is something that is absolutely critical, we convey that to the fire department, so that if they're not under the same impression we are, they get that information.
And where are the trucks coming now? South
So
of
current-
Woolbright or north of Woolbright?
So currently, Boynton Beach has closed Fire Station number 1 until they rebuild City Center. Their assets there were dispersed amongst Fire Station 4, which is south of Woolbright, and Fire Station 5, which is over at Gateway.
Yeah.
Our response comes predominantly from Fire Station 4, which is south of Woolbright. However, we do receive response from the Station 5. The city, as most fire departments, have what they call a move-up plan in place. So when their assets are out of the station and involved in a call, a fire or a medical call, they already have a plan to move up additional units halfway into this district. It's something that's been in place for a considerable amount of time. You know,
So that's the update, that it's 7 minutes.
7 minutes is the average for what we're getting about right now
Okay, thank you.
from Wayne.
Let's just
Some people, may not be, I don't know, you know?
Wayne?
The updates and the reports in front of you, if you have any questions. The only thing I just wanted to add is there is increased construction around town, and I'm expecting that to, the summer months to be a pretty busy summer month. So if contractors are given 2 parking passes, I'm trying to look at some of the streets where they just park on one side instead of blocking both sides of the street, especially with just getting by. If you are seeing vehicles that shouldn't be there, feel free to call and let us know. But we're just trying to manage the construction throughout town. That's about it.
I had a question for you. Different residents have asked me about the house that's at the, let's call it the mouth of Hudson, across the A1A to the east. Is that, this house where the work stopped, the great big large house?
Yeah, they started back again.
They did start.
60, yes, the job had ceased for about 4 months, 4 to 5 months. It was a discrepancy between the contractor and the owner, and they're not getting the correct inspections. So with all that confusion taking place, I put a work stop in effect, trying to get them back on track. So now they're supposed to be going back to completing the project. The owner wants to complete it by the end of the year before he gets back.
I have a question for Wayne. The recent rainstorm we just had this week brought up the drainage problems on Dolphin Bend coming in from Colonial Ridge. And I know you and Lisa Trepepi had a meeting with representatives of, can you give us an update on where we are with that?
Sure. The Colonial Ridge had brought an engineer in to discuss the issues that we found in response to the problems that's being faced in Dolphin Bend. Unfortunately, that engineer who we sat down, had a meeting with, quit on Colonial Ridge. So they had to go back and get another engineer and bring him back to the table. So that's kind of like where we are. We had someone who was going to be working with, and we try to give people the benefit of the doubt and due process and allow them to correct the problem versus us jumping ahead into it. So we're now in discussions with the new engineer, and we just have to wait till we're still waiting for him. So he now has the information. He has a couple of questions. They're talking. Lisa and the engineer Jerry are talking to each other.
And just as quickly as today, we sent the new engineer answers to his most recent questions.
Do we have any idea, how much longer are we we're getting ready to get into the heavy rainy season. That seems to be our biggest drainage problem one of our biggest drainage problems around town right now.
Yeah, the biggest thing is having them stabilize the earth in that area. And at the same token, we're allowing them, as I said, to do that. Hopefully we can get an answer back, within a week or so.
Is that gonna be like a wall or a curb, or do we have any idea? Is it up to them?
We could put a swale there. We could very well put a swale there.
On their side or our side?
On our side, on our right of way, and that will allow the percolating instead of the sheet flowing that's taking place.
That's a lovely narrow area for the
Yeah,
swale.
that would remove, if that takes place, then you have to remove the vegetation that's there. And as such, they're now gonna have to install vegetation on their parking lot
And we
to
know
make
where
that
that's gonna
happen.
end up.
So that's gonna be very difficult, so that's why we're trying to work with them to come up with a solution, that's amicable for both.
When you're dealing with them, are you dealing with the homeowners as an association, or you're dealing with the landowner, since that's a land, lease
It started with
situation?
the property management company, that's assigned, so we directed that to the conduit, and then they in turn have hired an engineer for us to do.
But
the
they're
dialogue
taking
with.
responsibility, they're not
They're
punting
taking-
it to the landowner then?
No, they're taking
since
the
he-
responsibility to come up with a solution, because it's one of those situations wherein we've got to get the towns right away. However, they are required by our ordinances to provide vegetation between the commercial property and the residential property. So, we're just trying to work with their engineer to come up with the solution that has to stabilize.
Right, and doesn't the shrubbery have to hide the commercial property? And
That's-
isn't it a lot shorter than it was originally?
was.
Didn't it? Yeah.
That's one of the other
So
areas
replace
that
the
we're
whole
working with them on.
A small version.
We also have the ordinance that says that the water needs to be maintained on their property.
And they can't sheet
So it
flow
looks like
over
bigger
adversely.
trees and a
So
nice
there's
wall
a
or
couple-
whatever.
That's right, so there's a couple of issues that's there, that Lisa has pointed out to them and has provided them the guidance and pointed to the code violations that as it currently stands. Failure for them to not comply with something will then move to the next level, but we're in a negotiating stage of trying to get them and give them the benefits of trying to get this expeditiously rectified.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? Questions for Wayne? Yes.
For that Hudson A1A property, I think it's time that we think about putting a timestamp on as to when a house gets started, when a construction gets started, to when a construction needs to finish on the exterior. And I know that Delray has an issue with a house that is under a permanent construction behind a fence, and it's an eyesore to the community, and there's a lot of residents that are complaining. It's going on for 3 years, and I know that Hudson A1A house, the shopping mall, as I call it, that thing is under construction for at least 2 years. That I've been in this town and drive by this thing,
And it doesn't get anywhere.
and it doesn't get anywhere.
But what happens legally
Right.
if somebody extends beyond, let's say you give them 13 months to build a house, I'm just making up a number here, and they don't hit the deadline because the owner is in a fight with his
There have to be
contractor?
penalties, it has to be an ordinance with penalties.
Well, I mean, the problem is, it's, because we've had this discussion too, if we have an ordinance that says, okay, you must complete construction by a certain date, because I think most codes out there, and Wayne can correct me, but provide, as long as you're getting a valid building permit, you can continue, you can proceed on, and that will extend you can have construction for a period of time. Because the problem is, if we put something in place that says you have to complete it by a certain period of time, what happens if they're 3/4 of the way through or halfway through?
In a hurricane, it's.
Right, or, I don't think we're going to stop them, and I don't think we would want to stop them. So that's kind of the quandary that we would have if we try to put in a hard and fast timeline on something like that. I certainly understand, and I know I've discussed it with Wayne, where okay, how long can something potentially go on? In most cases, you don't have it happen that often because people want to.
It's money.
That's right, it is.
But when they lose that little combination between developer, owner, or the money runs out, then the town's left with the eyesore.
Well-
Anything creative with it?
Well, the thing about it is, I mean, in most cases, what happens is they miss one of those 6-month windows, and then when they do that, then Wayne goes, and then they come back in and they want to renew their permit or get another permit, then Wayne can say, okay, you know, that's it, that's stopped. Now we're going to make you start all over again as far as you have to comply with all of our codes, with everything else now that's changed within the past 3 years. And normally that's a big enough incentive to force someone to say, oh, let me get this done right away because I don't want to have, I don't want to be under that.
Okay, we're gonna end the meeting with Rick Carey's words.
I've waited patiently to hear an update on Spanish River Drive drainage. Last
Moving
month, there
through
was
the
a lot of
budget process, it's a priority.
discussion about
It's
what we
the
do
priority
next,
in
and
drainage
I thought maybe Tracy's
and money.
report would have
Yeah.
included something about that.
I can just give you a quick update, Rick. We sent letters out to the property owners, and they had 30 days to get back to us and let us know if they're gonna remove the vegetation there, and then we can proceed forward after that, so.
Isn't it pretty clear they're not gonna do anything?
But we still have to give them that 30 days.
So we're spinning our wheels.
No, we're giving them the opportunity.
Yeah.
And then we're just gonna move forward.
They're not gonna do it.
Yeah, but I mean, don't you think it's their responsibility? They put it there, some of it's causing their own problems, and then the town has to pay for that
Apparently
problem?
that particular
Meanwhile,
easement
we're
doesn't have that
losing
language.
time, that's the point.
Rick,
Strange
Yeah.
language.
I agree with you, Rick.
Okay,
And
meeting
I'm gonna bring
Because
it up
if
in
we
the July
don't,
meeting.
we're going to run into problems down the road if we go in there and then damage their property. Because the problem is you remove it. Well, the problem is you remove a tree or something like that and go, hey, that's a violation. Okay, I mean, it never stops.